Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cave of the Cross Apologetics. I'm Patrick.
And I'm Tony.
And we're continuing our third part of Dr. Mitch Stokes' book, How to Be an Atheist, how many skeptics aren't skeptical enough. And we're getting to the really fun part, which is the morality part.
Yeah.
And so we get to accuse people of not being consistent within their moral philosophy. And as we'll see in this chapter that we're covering today, that kind of rubs people the wrong way. So that's where we're at, and then we'll continue on with what Dr. Stokes is saying through the rest of the book. This is kind of setting the groundwork of this is what we're not saying, but at the same time, this is also what we're saying. But then we'll continue on from there.
Right. So he starts this off. The name of the chapter is some bush clearing, and the subtitle here is taking offense. He says we tend to be a little sensitive when it comes to subjects we care deeply about, right? Excuse me. It's only natural that we take debates about morality to heart, right? But our feelings can get in the way of serious and sober discussion. And so he quotes Senator Armstrong here, who was in a debate with William Lane Craig, mm-hmm. and Armstrong is complaining that Craig, I guess, is being insulting and insensitive to him when Craig questions the foundation of his morals. Mm-hmm. Right? He's saying, my previous book on religion was a debate with William Lane Craig, a prominent evangelical who also abuses atheists. In his opening statement, Craig, on the atheistic view, there is nothing really wrong with your raping someone. Of course, Senator Armstrong doesn't like that. Right? Well, yeah. And so he says the point for now is that it's insulting. So Craig insulted him. Now, Craig said, based on your view, on the foundation of your view, there's nothing wrong with that, mm-hmm. right? He's not saying Senator Armstrong likes that or agrees with that.
Or
right?
does so.
Or does it, right.
Yeah, he calls it, libelous, which is a legal term where you can sue people for defamation of character.
Yeah. But, so he also talks about Paul Kurtz and his complaint about Dr. Craig. And so his conclusion here is that there's a confusion. Right. There's a confusion here, and it's thinking that questioning a person's ethical grounds, right, their ethical foundations, is ipso facto questioning that person's moral character.
Right.
Right.
So when we say, by what standard do you say that rape is wrong, murder is wrong, lying is wrong, or by what standard would you say being faithful to your wife is good, or taking care of your children is a virtuous thing? What we're not saying is atheists can't do those things. Therefore, Christianity is superior because it gives us the ability to do so. Well, no, that's not what we're saying. In fact, even within the Christian worldview, too, while things may be viewed as virtuous to us and still sinful in God's eyes, that all the unrighteous good deeds are like filthy rags, there's still a consciousness within people, as Romans 2 talks about, that they try to adhere to, but still fail even within that. But we're also made in the image of God, in that we share this kind of heralding proclamation that God is real within our own makeup as creatures of God, as in fact, not just creatures of God, but as human beings of God specifically. No other creature has that. And so we're not saying that atheists don't have the ability to do so. We seem to be talking past each other if that's where we're getting at.
Right. And this is a really important point, right?
Yes,
because
very much so
we're not questioning the moral character of anybody when we ask about the foundation of their moral beliefs. We're asking, okay, why do you believe that that's wrong? Right. And so that's what we're trying to get at. We're trying to get at so this is kind of a worldview type of presuppositional, type of question, right? Where you say, does your worldview allow for a particular position, right? And then so this character questioning is what's happening, right? We're questioning the foundation of their morals.
Yep, and so the question is to consider is, if there is no God, why? Why be good? Why do what is right, why we shouldn't be bad, why we should do certain things, why we shouldn't do certain things. There's both positive and negative within all moral foundation, really. And Dawkins seems to take a challenge to that, and his reply to Christians or religious people when he gets asked this is, "Do you really mean to tell me that the only reason you try to be good is to gain God's approval and reward, or to avoid His disapproval and punishment?" What he usually says after that is, everyone should avoid this person because they're a thought process away from killing us all. Which again, he then falls into this same pattern of saying, well, if you don't have this, then you'll just do whatever moral,
immoral thing that comes
amoral, really.
Yeah.
It goes on to talk about the believer looks like we're questioning the atheist's motivation for behaving, asking why the unbeliever would even want to take that action. There might be some truth to this, he says, but it isn't. The most foundational, strictly speaking, isn't why be moral, but rather, are there any objective moral standards at all? That's what we're really asking. Yes, again, we can ask the question, why be moral? Why should we do good things? And we can get into kind of the ethics of that, especially when we're covering specific, hard details that the world is, especially now, like, abortion and without kind of an objective standard, you kind of just make your point for whatever side you want, and hopefully you convince somebody of that, and that's kind of where you're at. But if there's objective moral standards, which is the real big question we should be asking, then we can appeal to that and say abortion is wrong because, or abortion is right because, or in certain instances this, or in certain instances that. Right. So there's definitely a foundational question that we ultimately should be asking, and also too that would probably help us stop talking past each other, and we don't have to. We can kind of go based off of, as what we talked about in Dr. Lyle's interview, is not always just say by what standard. There's an attempt to get that person to think deeper about what they're actually saying. Right.
Yeah. So this idea of objective moral standards is the idea of standards that exist independent of our opinions, our beliefs, our feelings, that sort of thing. They are objective. Like, for instance, the highest mountain above sea level on the planet is Mount Everest. Notice, it is objectively the highest mountain. Mm-hmm. So what if I don't believe that? Doesn't change a thing, right? Well, what if my culture or society still doesn't? It is objectively true. Mm-hmm. And so the idea here, it's true independent of what I believe, what my opinions is, and that sort of thing. Can we have a morality that is like that, that is objective, right?
And so when you have atheists or people who don't have a faith-based system in a god or gods, they kind of have to appeal to kind of the universe giving us that. In fact, part of the God delusion that Dawkins writes about, he talks about even religion giving us a part of what nature gives us, which is a moral character, not to kill each other, so that we can work progressively and cooperationally to achieve survival in a group setting. And so we don't kill each other because we're designed to be social, except when we are. You can always pick apart the detail, and there's good fodder for that. But again,
and he's gonna come to that. I think that's the next.
Yeah. I mean, he'll definitely cover that. But it's a question of where's the objective standard? Is it in nature? Is it ingrained in us because of evolution, or does it exist in God's character and His declaration to us tells us by what standard we should live by, and the things that we do and shouldn't do, and as the lawgiver we should follow the law, or there are consequences. So there are them. So the question, the most pressing question, isn't why atheists should be moral, though that's not entirely irrelevant. Dr. Stokes says the real question is whether naturalism can support or account for moral standards themselves, which is kind of what we were talking about right there.
Right. Yeah. So notice what he's saying. The question, we're not questioning the atheist's character, their actions, their motivations, right? We're not saying if there is no God, then no one can behave morally. That's not what we're saying. We're not saying if there is no God, then no one has any motivation to behave morally, right? What we're saying is if there is no God, or at least he's not saying it directly, but he's getting at it, right? Objective moral standards, those that are independent of us, do not exist, right? So we're not questioning the atheist's motivations and that their character and actions and that sort of thing. So that is a confusion that happens when you begin to ask fundamental questions about their fundamental, the basis of their fundamental beliefs.
Which is where like postmodernist philosophers and thinkers and social Darwinists come in and say, well, here's this culture and it says this, which if you are going to take this naturalism true, that might be the case. My tribe might have evolved certain traits that have made me a warring nation. And so we conquer and expand, but then we shut those things off so that once you've expanded far enough, you're not warring with yourself. Or there's other ones who have, developed a polyamorous system and have expanded that way. And so kind of what's true for one culture isn't true for another. And that's where you would derive your basis by naturalism supporting an account of that moral standard. So postmodernist says almost kind of in a consistent manner that if we kind of believe that there are these people groups around the world, it's more likely than not that they're going to form not universal concepts of right and wrong, although that might be the case because we're all human beings, but because of weather or resources or proximity to other nation states or tribes, they would form different positive and negative moral standards within their DNA structure that they pass on. Again, social Darwinism to me is a hard pill to swallow. Still.
Yeah. So the next section here, he talks about more question begging, right? And so he says here, he tries to explain why this confusion arises when you begin to question the the atheist moral foundation, right? He says we can easily get sidetracked, and largely because our moral beliefs are so deeply ingrained, right? In other words, why are they angry? Why are they saying you're talking about how I'm going to act, my motivation, my character? He says he gives us two reasons here. He says we have such a powerful sense of objective right and wrong that we often can't imagine alternatives, right? So they get angry when you question this because it seems so obvious, right? It seems so obvious that something is right and something is wrong. We have a powerful sense, he says, of right and wrong. And secondly, he says, added to this is the fact that most people share our beliefs about morality. We all view the morality the same way. And so it seems like we're questioning them, right? When we're asking the question about their moral foundation, right? And so he says philosophers make this mistake, right, as well. He quotes here Kai Nielsen, who was a famous Canadian ethicist. So this is a rather lengthy quote, but I think it's interesting here that we should take a look at it here. Torturing human beings is vile. Exploiting and degrading human beings is thorough evil. Cruelty to human beings and animals is, morally speaking, unacceptable, and treating one's promises lightly or being careless about the truth is wrong. If we know anything to be wrong, we know these things to be wrong, and they would be wrong and just as wrong in a godless world and in a world in which personal annihilation is inevitable as in a world with God and in which there is eternal life. Yeah. So we know these things are wrong.
And just like how we looked at our last section of Krauss and Hawking and other people, the scientists, trying to say, well, you can believe in God if you want, but in a world of science, we've kind of have no need for God, and so throw him out. So here, he's attempting to do the same of right or wrong. It doesn't matter if you believe in God or not believe in God. This is all true because we know it.
Yeah, right.
Well, that's the whole
So
circular.
The question is, and why is it question begging? Because that's the question we're asking.
Right.
How do we know it? how do we know it, right? Why do we know that that's wrong? Right. And he doesn't, just to say we know it isn't answering the question, right?
And we were talking before the show, you can come up with a number of defeaters for these. Torturing human beings is vile. Well, according to who? We've all watched 24, where Jack Bauer, pretends to torture the terrorist family and pretends to kill them and extracts information of where the bomb is so that the president doesn't blow up or whatever it might be. Or, cruelty to animals. But by what sense? Again, we vivisect creatures alive to see how medication flows through them. And that's kind of a torture to some people. So at what point is that morally speaking unacceptable? Mm-hmm. Or are there defeaters for that? It's like, oh, okay, well, if half the world's going to blow up, then it's okay to torture people.
Right. Well, a little more than half.
A little more. 51%.
That's right, 51%.
Yeah, tyranny of the majority, right there. So yes, as Tony was saying, he's not answering the question of why believe this, or
what makes these things wrong.
Yeah,
why are these things wrong? He is not answering that question. He answers it by saying, well, because we know it. Mm-hmm. Well, okay, fine. We can say that about anything.
We all believe in God. Romans 1 tells us that. So we could tell the atheist, you know that to be true. Yeah. And you know that because we know that.
Yeah.
Great. Okay.
So he goes on further because he wants to really make this point. I think it's an interesting point. Senator Armstrong here, he says, is susceptible to the same type of mistake, right? Senator Armstrong raises the question of whether it would be wrong for you to hit someone in the face for no reason, right? Is that wrong? He concludes, as is natural, but not necessarily correct, that it is indeed wrong. And so now here's Armstrong's explanation about that, right? He says, and I'll just quote his quote of Senator Armstrong here. The only way around this conclusion, that is, that it's morally wrong for you to hit someone for no reason, is either A, to admit that everyone in the world is allowed to hit you on the nose whenever he or she feels like it, or B, to claim that you are allowed to hit others when they are not allowed to hit you. Right. And so he says, those are your options. Now, here's the problem that he finds with those options. Ready? He says, what's wrong with either A or B? Right? Well, here's his reply. Response A is abhorrent.
Right.
Response B is arbitrary. Right? Some people, so that's his answer. Right?
So it's abhorrent that everyone in the world is allowed to hit you on the nose wherever he or she feels like it. And it's also arbitrary to claim that you're allowed to hit others when they're not allowed to hit you.
Yeah. So abhorrent means I don't like it.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah, right? That's a good reason to I just don't like that, right? Yeah. So he says, suppose Senator Armstrong is right, A is abhorrent, and B is arbitrary. What follows? Certainly nothing substantive about the foundation of morality. Right. Look at it this way. We could find option A disagreeable or repugnant while still consistently believing that moral nihilism is true. Right? We can not like it and just say, well, because moral nihilism is true. Right? He says our disagreeable feelings don't count much in themselves toward the truth of moral realism one way or another. Right? Similarly, the arbitrary option is entirely consistent with nihilism. Right? Denial of moral realism. So nihilism is completely compatible with, and perhaps even implies that our moral choices are ultimately arbitrary, right? That is grounded in mere preference.
Right.
All right. Right. So in both cases, these philosophers are appealing to just what we all know. We don't like it. Right.
Good. But again, you can always come back. You should be able to hit someone because it keeps us on our toes for survival purposes. Yeah. We've become lackadaisical in our technology-ridden society, and we no longer fear the thing in the grass that's the snake, and we should always be ready for it to catch it inches before it strikes us. And so, at any moment, we should not trust anybody that we're standing next to in the subway or on a bus, or anyone can come careening down the street. street and plow into your car for no reason whatsoever. So maybe you should do it first, or stay away from these people, or always be ready to, catch someone's fists before it hits.
So the issue here is either arbitrary or, abhorrent is not a good reason, right? We must ask the question, what makes these things wrong? Mm-hmm. What makes them wrong, right? That's the issue here, right? And so Hume attempts to try to do that. Right.
We go back to Hume, and did he ever make an attempt to try and explain morality? And he does. So Dr. Stokes says that it's an easy thing to do to mistake our moral sentiments, our strong feelings about that we have a moral system, for an argument in favor of the truth of the moral beliefs. So, I really feel like killing is wrong, or that we have these things that tell me, freedom is good, or, tyranny is bad. And so I'm using my pent up, rocket ship internal of saying, I really believe this, therefore it's true. So it's really easy to mistake those things. So Hume realized the importance of emotions for morality. In fact, why does he do this? It's because he wants to apply an experimental method to ethics. Again, Hume is attempting to apply science through all areas of life. And we had his fork, and so things are either observable or they're measured by relation. And so how can he measure this fact of morality? And he goes on to say that the only moral matters of fact he could find were facts about our moral feelings or our sentiments. So, I really feel strongly about that. Oh, well, okay, you were at a 0 before, and now you're at a 80%. So we can measure that relational.
Scientifically, we can look through that.
We can put the headband on you and get your physiological nature and test your sweat glands.
And what we're measuring is not the evil or the wrongness itself, but your feeling about the wrongness, right?
Right, exactly. So he goes on to say, in accord with empiricism and experimental method, he asks us to look and see. Take any action allowed to be vicious. Willful murder, for instance, examine it in all light and see if you can find the matter of fact or the real existence which you call a vice. In whichever way you take it, you find only certain passions, motives, volitions, and thoughts. There is no other matter of fact in the case. The vice entirely escapes you as long as you consider the object. So we can't consider the object, observe that the action is wrong, only that it's a deliberate killing. So, I go up and I kill somebody. Was that right? Was that wrong? What's your feeling about it? So in our society, in different states even, you have the ability to protect your property. So you can watch somebody stealing your car. You can go out and murder them. Well, not murder them because you're defensively killing. And so that's not vicious murder. Right. But in other states, you can't go out. You can only protect what's in your home, the castle doctrine.
Right. So Hume is saying, how do we measure it? Right? If killing is wrong, how do we measure it? And he says we can't measure the wrongness of it. All we can measure is our feeling about the wrongness of it. Right? Or our feeling of it, period. Right. It may even be the rightness of it in some instances is what the point you're trying to make, right? So we won't mention the states.
Well, exactly. We can observe some matters of fact. This, in fact, however, turns out to merely a fact about our feelings. So, as Tony was saying. Hume says about lying, for example. We perceive that lying is wrong. Well, okay, but why? Well, what we perceive is our feeling of wrongness. Not that it's wrong, but I kind of feel like this is wrong.
Right. Our feeling is what we perceive.
To what extent is that? Well, do I look good in this outfit? No. Oh, I probably should lie a little bit, and that's okay. So there's that lie. Or, the world's going to blow up in 22 hours. Should I tell somebody? If I don't tell anyone, that seems to be a lie, and that might be a greater impact to me. So I can take a measurement of that.
So again, really, he's just saying all we have to measure is our feelings.
Right. That's all we can either observe or have relation to ideas. Those are the the two prongs of Hume's fork.
That's how we know things, right? We either know it by observation, right? Our sense perceptions, our touching, feeling, tasting, whatever, or relation with ideas like mathematical concepts
Laws
or
of logic.
logical laws of concepts. So those are the only ways that Hume allows. And of course, none of those work for the evilness or the wrongness of something. And so all we can measure, he says, then, is our feelings about it.
Right. And so even if there is for him, some moral lawgiver, which he would probably doubt, since you can't measure that, and he wants a scientific approach for that, here's the only way in which he can do it. So Hume believed that if we take science seriously and apply it to ethics, we discover that morality is founded on nothing more than feelings or sentiments. And I think we're kind of seeing the rooster come home to roost in that these days. All morality depends upon our sentiments. Science cannot support the truth of our moral beliefs, but Hume believed that science has something to contribute to morality. Indeed, something surprising. He believed that his discovery was similar to that of secondary qualities.
So this is kind of interesting here, right?
Vice and virtue. Therefore, he compared things like sounds, colors, heat, and cold, which according to modern philosophy are not qualities of the object, but perceptions in the mind. So if you say ice is cold, well, for someone living in Florida, 56 degrees is freezing and you need to bring a parka jacket. But here in Michigan, 56 is a nice, we're going out in shorts to get the mail in the middle of December. Sounds, this is too loud, this is not too loud, depends on, or this is pleasing. That's one of those. If you don't like jazz, it's just a cacophony of noise. But if you appreciate jazz, then you can hone in on whatever jazz things you want. So with modern philosophy, are not qualities of the object, but perceptions in the mind.
And he gives us an example of color here. Right?
Yeah, the astonishing fact is that color of an apple isn't in the apple, but in the person perceiving the apple. And we kind of know this too because people have red-green deficiencies. And so, are you seeing red, and are you sure that's the same red that I'm perceiving that you're perceiving?
Yeah.
And is that pleasing to you?
Right.
Well, okay, what red's my favorite color, so a red apple is 80% pleasing to me, and so we can measure that. But is red a good apple and green a bad apple? How do we distinguish between types of apples?
Yeah, it depends on how hungry I am at the time.
To be sure, the apple is composed of molecules of specific structure, and light reflects off the surface.
So an apple is an apple, right? It has certain molecules that make it an apple. It has the color is, we are perceiving a certain wavelength that's bouncing off the apple, right? But the color is what's going on, right? Is what he's asking about here, right?
It's caused by an external factors, but exists only beneath the person's skin. The color is subjective. The person is the perceiving subject. Similarly, there are external factors that cause us our moral sentiments, but we are the source of those sentiments. And so on Hume's view, we're the source of moral value. Morality is subjective. So, why is lying wrong? Well, for me, I would say lying is wrong to me because, I don't like it, and it causes a big response to me. But maybe at the same time, maybe I'm a professional poker player, and, lying is kind of part of the game. And so if you lie to me out in the real world, I'll kind of take a little offense to it, but not as much as, some goody two-shoe Patrick version over in Michigan who doesn't like people lying. So again, there the subjective value of lying is entirely inherent in the person, and we say, oh, that person's moral compass is skewed, but what we're doing is we're kind of taking a swath of society and saying, that person went out and murdered drug dealers, and that's wrong. But according to that person, drugs ruined his family, and he was attempting to take out the source of the problem the way that he knew how to. And so, where's the moral divide there? Well, in that particular instance, then you have government and society saying these are factors that we will punish and not allow or make laws against to tell people, hey, we here and no further.
Yeah. So the point he's trying to make is there are their primary qualities. I think John Locke, the political philosopher, and he suggested that there are primary qualities in things and there are secondary qualities, right? Primary qualities like extension and that kind of stuff, right? Mass, that kind of stuff. But secondary qualities are the qualities that we as humans add to the object, right? For instance, color, right? And so he's trying to suggest, so that comes from us, it's subjective. And he's suggesting that Hume argued the morality works the same way. It's what we add to a particular maybe event, right? And so it is subjective. That's where it comes from.
Right. So in our everyday life, we still respond to sound, color, smells the way we did prior to learning that they're not objective out in their world. So too, after learning something similar about morality, we couldn't help ourselves anyway. Nature is too strong. So we have this. Even if we know about it, that it's subjective, we still don't really care because it's so ingrained into us. Yeah. We have this kind of revulsion to things like, the first time that you see a concentration camp video and you just are revolted about what people can do to other people, and the Holocaust Museum exists to kind of play on that type of ick factor. And so, that's okay for me, but not not okay for me, but for the Nazis it was fine. No, you have this kind of what Hume is saying is this ingrained nature that even if you recognize the fact that morality is subjective, you still can't defeat that internal sense.
Right. Yeah. And so this came to be known as we were talking earlier, as emotivism in ethics, where your emotions really determine right and wrong, right? How you feel about a particular action, that sort of thing.
So Hume and Dr. Stokes says the point for now is that moral feelings, our intuitions about right and wrong, are powerful players in ethical theory, as Hume recognized. And the strength of our moral beliefs can cause us to make some pretty serious errors when it comes to reasoning about ethics. Few unbelievers have ever followed Hume to the conclusion that there's nothing more to our moral foundation than the strength of our convictions, so there must be good naturalistic reasons for thinking there's more to morality than sentiment. So even though the people follow in the footsteps of Hume, even they say there's probably something a little bit more to that because, there's kind of a term right now of, I don't care about your feelings. There's facts over feelings. Well, that's usually made in a political or moral sense. And so it's what other factors contribute other than just I'm offended, or I feel bad about this, or I feel good about this, or I feel great about this. So there's, other than measuring your on a scale of 1 to 10, how happy are you? There seems to be more to declaring murder is wrong than that.
Yeah. And so, since Hume was trying to be consistent, and he suggested these various other folks with regard to foundation of morality don't want to follow Hume there in terms of his consistency. They have to come up with something else, right? And so he says perhaps Darwinism is the key.
Yeah. Hey, good old Darwin. Yeah. Coming to save us. And so one of the things that he says here is it seems that atheists or people that don't believe in God are that Darwin allegedly allowed atheists to lead intellectually fulfilled lives. So then let's look at Darwinism and Darwinistic orthodoxy to say where does our moral system come from, and that's kind of what we alluded to a little bit here, but that'll be in the next chapter.
That'll be in the next chapter. All right, great.
So again, thanks for liking our videos, sharing, subscribing. We really appreciate it. We're having a lot of fun doing these, and we hope that the videos help you and you enjoy our little book club, and we'll keep doing them until we don't anymore. There you go. So thank you, and join us next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.